Welcome to SpunTales.com, where we spin tales from around the web. This episode, we continue the story, The Falling, by J.D. Phillips. An advanced copy of The Falling was provided to SpunTales.com with permission to read on air. Be sure to follow her on her socials at Facebook.com/AuthorJD and Twitter.com/JD_author. Even so, he could tell from Randall's stunned expression it wasn't normal not to feel anything, and murmured the best, "Ouch," he could mutter. Lying, he now knew, wasn't currently one of his strong suits. "See what I mean?" Randall asked the doctor. "He's in shock, right?" "He's something," Dunrow replied, speaking more to herself than Randall. A rather ominous choice of words, he thought. Is your name Carhartt? You can be honest with me. You've been through quite a trauma. It's alright if you don't know." "I don't remember ever having a name," he said, speaking a bit too honestly, given the look on their faces. "Is Carhartt and Carhartt not a good choice?" Randall and Dunrow exchanged glances, speaking volumes without either of them saying a single word. They weren't sure yet what to make of him. Dunrow was particularly intrigued by whatever her brief examination had revealed. Randall was simply unnerved. Nowhere near as much as Ben had been, but enough to keep his distance. That was fine by him. Feeling Randall's anxiety as if it were his own was getting tiresome. "Sure," Dunrow said, removing her gloves with a snap before tossing them into a nearby bin. "For the moment, I suppose Carhartt is as good as anything else, if that's what you would prefer. There may be even some connection between that word and something from your life you're not yet consciously aware of." A connection to the word and his life. The idea interested him, even as the thought itself fell flat. Just as he didn't feel as though he'd ever had a name, he didn't feel he'd ever really had a life either. But he wasn't sure how one went about figuring out such a thing. What did having a life even mean, really? Was it as simple as being alive, or... "I know you're tired, Carhartt, but we should do a few tests before we move you into our room." Carhartt nodded automatically. "Will it be hard?" Dunrow blinked and held back a laugh. "The tests, you mean? Oh no. Just some scans and some labs. You won't have to do anything but keep still." "Oh. I can do that." Soon after, Ben returned with a wheelchair, a warm blanket, and a styrofoam cup half filled with hot chocolate. Randall pulled his jacket off of Carhartt, while Dunrow unfolded and draped the warm blanket over his shoulders in place. He enjoyed the warmth, even if the material grated against the skin, so much so that he would have been content just to remain here, holding it close to his chest, indefinitely. But Dunrow had other plans. The tests, she said, could not wait. Swinging his legs over the side of the table had been fairly simple. Lowering his feet down onto the floor while sliding his bottom off the table, on the other hand, proved far more complicated than anticipated. The cold tiles of the floor stung the bottoms of his feet, sharp as shattered glass, and caused him to lose what little balance he'd established immediately. Dunrow moved forward to catch him purely on instinct, and managed to take hold of his left arm with both hands before he could even think to try to move away. Pain radiated from the inside out, branching from the skin directly beneath her hands, but over the rest of his body as well. As though every last nerve ending was simultaneously jolted awake after a long dead sleep. The burning pricks of pain carried with them an unexpected barrage of images and emotions. Memories of a little boy killed after he blindly chased a red ball into a street. Parents screaming, crying, accusing. Guilt. Shame. Anger slowly morphing into defiance. Success at the cost of intimacy. Excelling at work almost more out of spite than the concern for the patient seeking treatment. Loneliness, pushed back by a busy schedule and business casual sex. No attachments allowed, because that made it easier to continue on without feeling. The memories came with such intensity that he almost lost himself in the web. Then he understood they weren't his own to hold on to, and quickly learned how to navigate between them. Dunrow, Miss Lisa Marlena Dunrow. Somehow he'd gone inside of her, or perhaps she'd gone inside of him, the instant that her skin came in contact with his, and now he knew her on a level she'd never allowed anyone else in her adult life reach. He hadn't meant to, of course, but he didn't know what to do with what he'd learned now. But he'd had enough, the pain of holding on any longer. Falling in deeper was way too much. He didn't realize he'd been shouting until Dunrow released her hold onto his arm, and he hit the floor hard enough to jolt himself silent. Pain flared out from his tailbone upon impact, but sharp as it was, he found it preferable to the wildfire of needle he'd suffered through only seconds earlier. Dunrow stood over him silent and pale, uncertain of what just transpired. She'd also caught a glimpse inside of him while they were connected. She'd caught a glimpse of the storm, and the grabby hands, and the screaming faces that lived within it, and she didn't understand. She wasn't certain she would ever be able to understand much of anything, ever again, and yet, were someone to question, she didn't have the words to even begin to explain the nature of her newfound uncertainty. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry," she said. The words came out on their own. "It wasn't your fault that the ball rolled into the street," he replied. "You couldn't have known. No one could have known the driver had fallen asleep." Why would... "Your parents were wrong to blame you." An alien gasp, dangerously close to a startled sob, slipped out of Dunrow's mouth before she could stop it. For 30 years she'd worked hard to bury that particular instance, going so far as to keeping all family photos well hidden to ensure her guests never knew to question. There were days when even she managed to forget Stefan had ever existed, when she could almost believe that the entire thing happened to someone else entirely. And now, not only was her brother on her mind, but this stranger spoke as though he'd witnessed the entire accident personally. "I did see him," he said, a hint of a smile lighting up his eyes as tears rose to hers. "He's never blamed you. It's okay to let go." SpunTales is a Heathen Digital podcast. If you'd like to start a podcast or be hosted on one, send us an email, info@heathendigital.com. If you're an author and you'd like your stories read on SpunTales, send us an email at info@spuntales.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, facebook.com/spuntales and twitter.com/spuntales. Thanks for listening.